Welcome to College Football 25. I'm giving you some of the best tips when you're starting a dynasty in this game, and it's sponsored by EA. I know some of you have been playing football games over the last 11 years, and some of you haven't touched a football game in 11 years. So with College Football 25, I'm going to walk you through some of the basics you're doing for dynasty mode and a couple of tips you may not know. When you start your dynasty mode, you're looking at two different options here. A cloud dynasty, which you can play by yourself or with some friends or some other dynasty people out there in the world, or an offline dynasty, which would be just you. It's really a bit of a personal preference here, but if you do have a cloud dynasty and EA happens to put out some hot fixes or some quick patches, you're gonna get them a little bit quicker if they're server side if you have a cloud dynasty than if you have offline, which means you have to wait for a patch. But again, completely up to you on which experience you want. Your next screen is going to be giving you a roster, and you basically can choose from the default one that the game ships with, or you can do an active roster if you happen to have loaded a roster onto your game. Dynasty setup is a massively important section that you want to make sure you pay attention to. You have a couple of things we're going to walk through first in dynasty settings. Skill level is going to shape your entire experience. You go all the way from freshman all the way up to Heisman. I think for most people, All-American's good. It can be a challenge, but know at any point if the games are too difficult, you can move it down. If they're too easy, you can move it up. Coach fire is interesting. So as you play this, you're going to be having the opportunity to earn new contracts, move to different schools, stay at the same school. But if you're doing bad, you could get fired. You could say that this is only going to be on for the CPU, meaning you won't get fired no matter how good or bad you do. But the CPU can still be fired, meaning you can go get a different opportunity to be a head coach. Or you can turn it off entirely if you just want everybody to stay right where they are. For me, I recommend keeping it at on or CPU only, depending on your experience. The coach XP speed setting is basically how fast or slow you're going to earn experience points to upgrade your coach and the different abilities. For most people, normal is completely fine, but you can go all the way up to fastest, or you can go all the way down to slowest. But again, normal should be good for most people. Each setting will give you different options, and they kind of explain it up there in the top right. Player edit permission is something that I kind of keep on commissioner only. If you're playing with a bunch of friends and you trust them, maybe you want to go ahead and say that any player can be adjusted. But I think commissioner only is fine for the majority of people. Injury, wear and tear. Wear and tear is a brand new feature this year that kind of makes sure that players can't just be running nonstop and have to take some plays off. They could actually get injuries if you're using them too much. Depending on your play style, you may want to keep this on or off, but I think this game is playing at its best with it on. A feature that not a lot of people know about is play call cooldown. What this basically means is that you can say if you call a particular play, you have to wait 5, 6, 7, 8. You can change this number as many times as you want before you can call that play again. So meaning if you're in a single back formation and you happen to call halfback dive out of that particular formation, you have to call 8 different plays on offense before you can come back to that play. This is kind of a feature you find in online dynasties of people that are kind of trying to make things a little bit fair, making people use more of the playbook, and you find play call limit in a very similar fashion. This means that you can call a play no more than 1, 2, 3, 4, and again, it can kind of move forward, but you can kind of limit people to calling a play a certain amount of times, and then after that it locks it and you can never use it again for that or the remainder of that game. Quarter length, I think, really depends on how much time you have available to you. I like to play 8 minutes with accelerated clock on and 20 seconds, but I kind of recommend that as you play games, kind of tinker with them a little bit. Depends on how much disposable time you have available to you, but 8 minutes, 20 second accelerated clock seems to be good. If you like to be in control of everything and kind of tinker with it all, you can put full control on, but you can also put it on simple, which means that auto recruiting and auto progression are turned on. You can do customize, meaning you want to change, something individually. League advancement, I recommend keeping on manual. This means that after you finish a game, if you still want to tinker with stuff or go into practice or mess with your depth chart, you can do that or do your recruiting after, and it doesn't just automatically advance after a game is played. I do recommend for the auto recruiting to turn it off. I think it's a solid feature if you want to get your prospect board sort of filled out, but it doesn't do as good of a job as I would think it should in terms of maximizing the recruiting hours you have every single week. So for me, I say auto recruiting turn off, but you can try it if you want, but I think you'll like to have it off. If you want to have a dynasty with a bunch of other people, you can limit the amount of maximum users and minimum users on it. You can change it to public or private. You can put a password on it, a league name, to make sure that it's something that only your friends or people you want to actually get into the league. And then for your ball hawk, heat seeker, and switch assist, I recommend keeping this at individual. But if you're running a league, for example, and you say you want everybody to have ball hawk turned on or everybody to have it turned off, you can absolutely do that if you want. Importing team builder is really cool. Team builder is a way that you can actually create and customize a school and then bring them in here into your dynasty and then replace another team with it. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to remove a team like Illinois. I could go in and choose one of the teams that I've downloaded. I could choose the Reno Renegades, or I could choose the Gresham Knights. We'll put the Gresham Knights in there. Yes, I want to use the team builder roster. You could actually just leave the Illinois roster there and swap out the team look. And then now you have a team builder roster in the game. Custom conferences are one of my favorite things that they've brought back for College Football 25. Let's say that you're looking at the Pac-12 and you're like, I think maybe Air Force should go in there. You could also add another school and say, well, maybe a team like Ball State She moved over to the Pac-12 as well. Maybe you want to bring some of the other teams back. Like I want to go ahead and find Colorado and put Colorado back in there. You can change this as much as you want. Basically, each conference needs to have 4 teams remaining in it. And then I believe you have a maximum you can put in there as well. But it's really fun to kind of go around as things happen in real life, or things that you don't like that happen in real life, or things you wish could happen. You can kind of move it around and make your own conferences if you so choose. This is also great if you're running an online dynasty and you want everybody to be in the same conference. You can kind of move teams around. Everyone chooses their favorite team. You bring them all in one super conference, and then you can actually go in and do conference rules for that as well. You know, divisions, changing the name of the actual divisions, the championship game location, the criteria for that. So this is top teams by conference record. You could also do division leaders by conference record. You can go in here and say there's no conference championship game, that there's 10 conference games that are in there. There's a lot of different flexibility with it. When it comes to selecting your actual team, you can choose whatever team you want. There's also filters here to help you go and look by the star rating, which is sort of how prestigious they are. They sort of a school that maybe is finding their way now in the football subdivision, like JMU, or they sort of a 5-star team like an Alabama, a Georgia, a Michigan, a Notre Dame, an Ohio State. I like to play where I start as a smaller school and work my way up to a bigger school, or maybe take a smaller school and make them into a powerhouse, but everybody wants to play some way different. When you're selecting your role, this is basically the type of coach you're going to be. So you can be a head coach, an offensive coordinator, or a defensive coordinator. These are always going to be interesting, and your abilities kind of map to them a little bit early on, but in College Football 25, whether you're a head coach, OC, or DC, you're still going to play both sides of the ball, and you're still going to be handling all of recruiting. So really, it's just about your personal preference here. When it comes to choosing a coach, you can take the existing coach that's already there, which is a fictional coach that the game is made up. They're going to have a much higher level, a bunch of abilities already pre-selected that you cannot roll back, or you can create a brand new coach, which is kind of the way I recommend going. When you select create a coach, you're going to be looking at your backstory. So you have motivator, which is really about boosting your guys' ratings, their composure, getting them ready to present on the field. Your recruiter option, which is going to really help you make sure you get the best possible talent into your university. And then you have tactician, which is really about once they're on the field, the X's and O's, making sure they're playing at peak performance. This is definitely kind of a personal preference thing. I go back and forth between recruiter and motivator, but tactician has really good benefits, but it really depends on the school you're going to. And if you're at a major program like an Alabama and Ohio State, maybe recruiter is not really as important because you're going to already be able to get a lot of good guys. But if you're at a smaller school like a Kennesaw State, you probably want recruiter in that regard. So for here, we're just going to take recruiter. When you create your head coach, you've got a lot of different options to choose from. So first and last name, offensive and defensive playbooks, your alma mater, your pipeline. And pipelines are interesting because they used to be by state, which it kind of looks like they are at first, but then you start realizing that you have the Big Sky, Central Florida, there's Southern Florida, Northern Florida. There's a lot of different options here, but basically, in terms of recruiting, this is where you gotta have an extra little bit of help so that you can try to land some better recruits. So choose an area that makes sense, maybe for your school, or maybe where you ultimately want to go, because you might start at one school and then, you know, accept a job somewhere else where you ultimately want to go for the rest of your career. Adaptive AI is going to be what happens for your coach when you're super simming games or simulating games in general. It's kind of how your coach actually plays. So are you more balanced, where you kind of pick and choose your options? Are you very aggressive from the jump? Are you very conservative? Your no huddle play style, do you like to run the no huddle? So if so, when the game is being simmed, if it's that aggressive, you'll be doing it a lot. But if you have it conservative, you're running more of a pro style, sort of take your time offense. And then offensive and defensive aggressiveness, you can set these directly from right here with a little slider. The more to the right it is, the more aggressive you are. The more to the left it is, the more conservative you are. In terms of your appearance for your coach, there's like 500 heads in the game. Like, I'm not even joking. And as you kind of go down this list, you're going to see different coaches that are sort of increasing in age. You get more gray hairs. You got to get down here to the bottom. You can see, for example, you got a dude here with some pretty long gray hair. You got guys with beards. There's a lot of different options. No bald options if you kind of look for a bald head coach out there, but there's plenty to choose from, in my opinion, and you just essentially pick one that you like. Your physique allows you to pick just your height and your weight, and then from an apparel standpoint, there's only 2 options this year. I'm hoping for more in the future. But you can basically either rock a polo, like you kind of see in the guy right now, or you can rock a sweater as well. When you boot up your dynasty, you're going to have sort of an actions tab, which is going to be the key things you want to make sure you're doing each and every single week. Now, I have an entire video that talks about the best ways to recruit, the best ways to sort of move forward on prospects in each different stage to make sure you're having the best recruiting class. So make sure you check that one out. We'll jump into the custom schedule option, which is really cool. You can come in here each individual week that doesn't have a lock icon on it. If it's a non-locked one, like these 3 you see here, that means it is a non-conference game. If it is a lock icon, that means it is a conference game and you cannot actually change those. If you go down here to example and say Clemson, and we're like, I don't know if we want to play Clemson the very first game of the season, you could change it to a team like, you know, maybe the Coyotes, who are inspired by my Cascade Valley Coyotes, you can see right here. So you can change it to an FCS team. And then again, you'd be playing that at your home stadium. You could say, okay, well, now maybe I want to play Kansas at Kansas, and that'll kind of, give you a little bit of a harder schedule there. Top story section is really cool because it gives you a snapshot of things as they're happening across your college football dynasty. So you can see the Heisman watch, you're going to see Carson Beck, you're going to see more players, more different things that pop up here to give you a pulse of what's really happening across the league. Each tab has something individually too, so we can see the preseason rankings, you can jump directly into them or see the snapshot from here, your conference standings to see sort of how you're racking up against those guys. The preseason All-Americans, which is really cool, and this will sort of change as different stages go on. You might see award winners or different races like the Heisman race, and they'll populate here too. You can always keep tab on your coach abilities. We'll give you a quick look at this one. Again, I have a video that talks about all of the best coach abilities to really choose and go for and breaks them down in full detail for this spider graph. But just know that as you get your coach points, which appear in the top right of this screen, you want to use those here. You can use them on recruiter to make sure you're mapping those out. You can go to different areas like strategist or tactician, etc. Even if you didn't choose those from the beginning, you can kind of unlock those as you win more games. You also can get a look at your offensive and defensive coordinators. You can't actually buy what they have, but they're going to have ones and they're going to have their own paths that they kind of go after. They could leave you in the offseason and go to a different school. They could stay here for a long time. Just really a lot of things happen with that. But in terms of your coach actually getting upgrades and getting points and doing things enough to really get those coach points, this is the screen you want to look at, your coach XP goals. It'll show you what you get if players are drafted in the 1st through 7th round, individual game goals you can do. So it tells you how much XP you get for those and how many times you've actually completed those as well. And there are a ton of those. You have recruiting goals as well. You have stat goals that come across here too. And there are a lot of those as well. So it's really your time to figure out, okay, well, I need to upgrade my coach. I'm close to something. What do I need to do and how many points is that going to give me? You can kind of see it right here. If at any point you want to see what your contract's looking like, you can kind of see what the previous years for the school were and then where you basically are right now. We have, again, a goal of trying to win 7 games. We're currently safe from our job security and we're on a 3-year contract. So it gives you a really good snapshot of what you've done in the past and also what you need to do right now to make sure you don't get fired. Scheme and playbook is really cool too because you can dive in here and change things around a little bit. So your offensive scheme and defensive scheme you set when you created your coach, so those cannot be adjusted. But your offensive playbook, if you're like, I'm not really feeling Illinois' playbook, I want to switch to Jacksonville State. I don't like what I had on defense. I'm going to switch to a 3-3-5 tight defense. And you can kind of see each formation and package that you basically have as an option within that to make sure that it's good. And if you really like it, go into practice mode, try it out. Make sure before you hop into a game, because when you're in a game, you got to roll with it for the rest of that time. An area that a lot of people overlook is going to be the team section, your depth chart to figure out, who's starting, who's not starting, looking at your roster as a whole. But the red shirt section is a place you should absolutely look at. Red shirts in this game are actually handled just like real life. A player can play in up to 5 games while still being able to be redshirted. If they play more than that, they lose their redshirt status. But if you look at your roster and you're looking at this, for example, and saying, all right, Evan Perry is a guy that I like, but he's not going to play this year. So I'm going to go ahead and, put a red shirt on him. I'm going to put a red shirt on Christian Powers. And what that allows you to do is keep their freshman status going into the next season so that they're not losing a year of eligibility just because you happen to have a 90 overall ahead of them on the depth chart. Stats and records will show you exactly what you're thinking. Season, career, team, coach stats as well, and records. Records are very cool in my opinion because you have national, you have different ones by conference, and you can also sort of go through here and look at every single conference. You can actually go by team as well, including your team. And it breaks down what those guys were able to do across. So you can see the leaders for pass yards at Alabama is A.J. McCarron, Devonta Smith in receiving yards. You can go by season again, by a national level, by a conference, and then again, you could break it down by the individual team. And then same thing for game, national, conference, and individual team. It's really cool as you're trying to build your program, especially programs that haven't been around that long. You can really put your stamp and leave your mark. And then Dynasty Central will be super key for you as well. Your league settings are kind of what we looked at in the very beginning as you dive in through here and you're like, well, All-American was too tough, I'm going to put it to varsity. Or All-American is too easy, I'm a demon, I'm really good at the game. You can swap it over there to Heisman as well. Play call cooldowns, again, you can turn those on and off at any point that you would like and keep things moving. But again, these are the exact same settings you get when you first start your dynasty. XP sliders are a great option as well. So for example, you can say that I feel like quarterbacks aren't really getting experience points as much as I would like them to. You can crank this bad boy up from 100% and you can max it out to 300% if you want to get crazy. Or I feel like fullbacks don't get enough love out there. You can, again, max it out. Maybe you're like, hey, defensive tackles, they're upgrading way too fast. I want to go ahead and move that down. I don't recommend moving this a crazy amount. Like if you're going to move it, I maybe would go up like 10 or maybe 20 or down 5 or down 10. You can play around with it, but don't get too extreme because you could really mess up the experience that a lot of these guys are going to be needing to get upgraded. Gameplay sliders are when you're trying to look for something to really maybe help cater towards your playstyle. Maybe you feel like your quarterback accuracy isn't as good as you want it to be, or you want it to be more accurate. You can move it up from 50 in increments to, up to 100. Let's say you're playing against the CPU and you're like, I think the CPU is too accurate. You could drop it down by 5 or 10 or individual amounts that you want. These can get a little crazy, so as you play with them, I recommend doing them in small incremental movements. Don't do big crazy swings of like, don't go from 50 to 20. Play around with it a little bit, figure out what works the best, but know that these will help you figure out how you want to be. Maybe you're thinking, hey, punts don't go far enough. I want to boost that up a little bit, or injuries are happening too frequently or infrequently enough. Penalties as well. You can turn individual penalties and things off. You can say kick catch interference, I want it out of here. Offensive pass interference, get it out of here. There's a lot of really cool things you can play around with here to make this league and this dynasty as customized to your liking as you possibly want. User settings is an option that's going to allow you to figure out, okay, for coin tosses, for example, I want to always be with the wind or against the wind. My control scheme for individual things you have out here. Revamp passing. This is my favorite passing option, but if you want one that's more similar to Madden or previous one, placement and accuracy, classic passing, all those are an option. But I recommend doing revamp passing. It's the new one. I think it's fantastic. Pass lead increase, I recommend putting it to small. You can also do medium or large, but I think small is really the best option right now. And then your reticle speed is sort of as you're moving your left stick to do a pass lead, whether it's up, down, left, right, or diagonal. It's sort of the speed of which it will do that. I recommend keeping it at around 7. You could go to 8, you could go to 9 maybe, but again, hop into practice mode, try out this and see how it feels for you. But there are additional accessibility settings for things like subtitles or larger on-field graphics, turning vibration on and off, having color blindness on, brightness different effects, quick chat options. There's a lot of really cool stuff here to really cater this exactly how you need it. Same thing for visual feedback, a list of options for you to go through, and then volume control. If you're like, hey, I want to hear the commentators less, you could lower them down. I want the, stadium speakers with it's going on to be a little bit less. You can change and move anything around. For me, for example, because I make content, I lower music down to 10. If you're in an online dynasty and you have some people in there that may be problematic and you need to get them up out of there, or maybe they just don't have time to play and they're like, hey, can you remove me from the league? You can go in here, you can actually hit the A button or X button if you're in PlayStation and figure out, you'll get options. I can't kick myself from the league, but you'll have options to remove them or reset certain things. You can also see how people are doing. So how many hours they have left in recruiting. Have they finished their recruiting this week? If they are, it'll maybe be at 0. The results of their actual game, who their opponent was, if they're on auto progress mode. You can actually press Y or triangle and invite somebody from a gamer tag or a friends list too. So this is kind of how you want to control who's in your dynasty, get a pulse of what they're doing, if they're ready to advance or not, and maybe invite somebody new if you'd like to. And if it all comes crashing down and you're like, I just want to retire, maybe create a new character. You can retire completely from college football. You could create a new character as well. And if you jump in and create a new character, remember, you will lose the head coach that you just had, but it puts you back to a screen to go ahead and select a different team. So you could say, I want to go be, the Maryland Terrapins. And then you start through the exact flow of head coach, OC, DC, and continuing your journey on. Each week, something I highly recommend that you go ahead and look at is going to be your My School update and your Coach XP goals. The Coach XP goals show you how much XP you're getting week over week, and if you're close to getting another coach point. Your My School update is very important because it tells you if players are at risk for transferring. So here, for example, we can see from a playing style perspective, we've got a couple of guys that are in orange. If they're in yellow, you might be okay. Orange, there's a pretty high chance they're going to be looking at leaving. And then from a pro potential standpoint, you can see that we're okay, but there are a couple of guys like our starting running back, our major right tackle, a couple of other guys on defense that are really at risk for leaving our school. If you go to recruiting and you tab over to the My School section, what's really cool about Dynasty Mode is you can actually go in and look at playing style and say, okay, I see down there that I have a corner that is looking at transferring, so I can go to corner and see that if he's a man-to-man corner, he cares about interceptions. This has a very high impact on their satisfaction from a play style. If they're a slot corner, good news, interceptions is still their thing. We have 5 interceptions in the season, which isn't exactly great, so they're probably a little frustrated because we're not really making anything happen there. And then zone corners, again, would be the exact same thing. From that screen, we also saw that our pro potential was also hurting us a lot. So I can see that A-Roy Jr., for example, is sort of frustrated, as is Hemby and Whitaker and a few other guys. what you can see here is that the only way to really improve your pro potential is to have guys get drafted. So projected first round picks, we have 1, and then projected 4th through 7th, we're at 4, which again is low, is not very good. If we had more 1st and 2nd or maybe even 3rd round draft picks, these guys would be a little bit less frustrating. At the end of a season, just like a real coach in college football, you can decide that maybe you want to look at some job offers and see if there's something better out there for you. So on the job offers situation, you can see that Ohio State is actually looking at us as a potential offensive coordinator, which again, isn't really the head coach maybe we wanted, but you get a chance to go to Ohio State. You can look at Pittsburgh and we would have an opportunity to be the head coach there. It's actually a higher prestige school. They're at 3.5 stars right now, or an OC or another OC at Wisconsin and Tennessee. For us, I think Pittsburgh is a pretty good opportunity. We are going to go ahead and try to take that one. We are going to sign, and now you're going to be the head coach at Pittsburgh. What's really cool is that in the very top right of the screen, it tells you that your old school logo, Maryland, and then a 4-week counter to Pittsburgh. So it's telling you how many weeks you have left at your current school before you start being the head coach or whatever your new job is at Pittsburgh. And then once you've actually become now the head coach or the new position at the new school, you can see the Pittsburgh Panthers were 3-9, 2-6 in their conference. And they actually went from a 3.5 stars to, I believe, a 2.5, if I remember correctly. So while we are happy to get the head coach, we now see why that they fired their previous head coach. And thus begins your journey. You're going to be able to go in here and manage your actual staff, and you can see who you actually have there. You can go in and look at their individual skill trees. So you can see your head coach. You can look at the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator at your new school as well. And so now you have an opportunity to figure out what they're good at, what you're good at, and what you're not good at, and try to fill in some gaps here. You can play up to 30 seasons in Dynasty mode, and it's really an opportunity for you to craft your story. You can do what you want, play how you want, and go wherever you want in your journey. And you can do, again, up to 30 years and see how many championships you could win or how many times you could possibly get fired. If you have any more questions about Dynasty mode, make sure you hit me up in the comments down below. Be safe, be smart, tell somebody you love them. Catch you guys on the next one.